Hey guys, welcome to another episode about the handmade creations from Darra Adam Khel. Today we're looking at Kalashnikov variants, and as previously we looked at handguns, then we looked at long guns. Today we're singularly looking at Kalashnikov AK platform variants and stuff coming out of Darra that is trying to copy the Kalashnikov designs. So first off, we have a couple milled examples with milled receivers. These are mostly copies of AKMSs. Most of these are in 222 instead of, well, let me rephrase, most of these are in 223 or 556-ish calibers as opposed to 762. You can tell by the shape of the magazine. Well, we can look at some of the smaller pieces on here. If you notice, the gas vent holes, if you notice some of the holes in the stock, you'll begin to see some of the parts of the rifle that just don't really fit very well. And you can notice that different from various other AK platforms, especially the trigger. If you take a good look at the trigger, you can see the trigger's a lot smaller. It's less elongated than a traditional Kalashnikov trigger, which we'll actually see later on and see the difference of. You also see the button that presses the folding stock into the rifle. That's very small and it's very different as well. You can tell with that. The stock is a bit different too. We'll see most of these when we compare them to an actual Soviet Kalashnikov. So one of the bits that's interesting on these guys is the magazine here. I'm not quite sure where it's from. The markings on it don't put it as far to my knowledge, they don't put it as a European design or even an Asian design from another country. It might be made in China, although I don't know because I'm not quite sure the injection molded or the polymer capabilities of the gunsmiths in Darra Adam Khel. So continue on, we had some questions about some of this stuff, and some people mentioned, there's the different manufacturing capabilities, what Pakistan had. And just so you know, so Darra is all handmade stuff by Pashtun villagers. And there are some other interesting manufacturers in Pakistan. One is Dawood Sons, which we covered on TFB a while back. They actually make shotguns for Cimarron, if I'm pronouncing that correctly. They actually make shotguns for them, and they are actually sold in the United States. Another of the big manufacturers in Pakistan is POF, which is Pakistani Ordnance Factory. This is actually a state-run government organization, and POF actually makes all sorts of stuff, mostly licensed stuff, for the Pakistani military. However, this is a modern manufacturing capability. It's got modern designs. It's got, they make G3s and MP5s, that sort of thing. And they make sort of stuff on there, but they're not the same as Darra at all. So anyways, going back to the Kalashnikov here, if you notice some of the, on the receiver cover, it has some wear on the inside of it, something you probably won't see in another Kalashnikov as well. But moving on to a stamped receiver, the stamped receiver gets a little bit more crude, I think. You can tell with the holes and the stock in the foregrip. The holes are very different than anything you've seen on other Kalashnikovs. They're much more smaller. Then if you look at the actual receiver itself and you look at the rear sight, you can tell there's just something off about it in a number of ways. Again, notice the trigger. The trigger is one of the biggest giveaways here. The trigger and the stock release button. You can tell with those two, it's very, very different. Also by looking at some of the dimples in the actual stamped receiver. It looks like the Darra gunsmiths, maybe they don't really have a good hand on the stamp production yet because mill is much more easier. You can work with, billet and cutting it down, but stamped is probably a little bit more difficult for them compared to, a stamped Soviet Kalashnikov. So some people are wondering who uses these Kalashnikovs or just rifles from Darra, but especially with the Kalashnikovs. So some of it will probably go to various criminal or terrorist organizations such as the Taliban or Al-Qaeda. However, a lot of it's going to go to a civilian population, a lot of Pashtuns who just want to protect themselves and their homes, that sort of deal. It is legal to own some of these as long as it's not in the military caliber, as we mentioned earlier. It's very difficult in legal Pakistan. However, on the illegal side, on the black market side, it's very easy to get a hold of these, and prices fluctuate between the years. They go up and down depending on the market and the political situation. There's also a number of Pakistani people who are just very interested in collecting and owning them. Now we've got two rifles to compare, and you can very easily notice the differences between some of them. Look at the stock, look at some of the details, look at, the finger grooves and the handguard that are not present on the Darra rifle. rifle. We can also tell that the stock itself, you see what I mean by it's not very elongated. It has the dimples that are in the original Kalashnikov just aren't there. You can also notice by looking at the front sight post. In an original Kalashnikov, the front sight post is much more smaller, much more straight up, more Sturmgewehr-like sort of deal. Whereas in the Darra version, it's just a little bit different. It's a little bit larger at the base as well. The rear sight, again, if you can notice it, as the cuts in it are just completely different. The graduation marks for different yardages are very different than in the original Kalashnikov, and you can see that as well by taking a good look at these two. So since over the past couple years, Darra really, as we talked about in the first video, they had their startings a century ago, and Darra has actually started to go underground a bit in the past 10 years, mostly because of the changing political situation and pressure from the United States on the Pakistani government to send troops in the FATA regions, various local problems, the Pakistani Taliban, which is very different than the Afghan Taliban, and just some of the more political factors, and a lot of access to Darra has gone down, and unfortunately for us, so we get to see less and less of these, and we'll probably see less and less as we go on in the future, which is a pity because a lot of these gunsmiths are just really talented, as you can look at some of the work that they produce here. So next up, we've got this 222 bore, probably around 223 as I mentioned earlier. It's sort of an AK-74 configuration. It has this odd Chinese Type 56 stock with a cheek piece that is molded to it. Again, polymer, I'm not sure where the polymer is coming from. It might be locally made, it might not be. However, it is most likely not a product of the region, as we've probably seen earlier as well. Anyways, guys, thanks a lot for watching. I really hope you appreciate the video, and I really thank you for watching the channel. Next week, we've got some Krink stuff from Darra Adam Khel, so if you're really interested, stay tuned for that. I'd really like to thank Ventura Munitions, which is one of our sponsors for the channel. They really help us a lot with ammunition, doing our various firearms reviews and that sort of deal. In addition, I'd really like to thank the Royal Armories and the National Firearms Center for allowing us to film at their facility and allowing us to take a peek in some of their reference collection. Thank you very much, and for my Pakistani viewers out there, Ramazan Mubarak.